Okay, so Amy and I, we have a really short little presentation here. It's basically going to tell you how to make sure that your submission is not delayed because you did not provide enough TD6 information in your summary of site condition. And we start with this flashback from last year where Amy and I did this presentation on water use determinations. And it explained how you have these two different streams for exempting a site from water use. You can either exempt it directly through TD6 using site-specific data. If that is the case, then you just present your arguments in your submission and you include the information in your summary of site condition. For sites that are not exempted through TD6, but where you still feel, drinking water should really not apply here, you can apply for a director's determination for water use. We use this multiple lines of evidence approach that's been developed, and it will then go through us. But the main thing here was this: include your arguments in the summary of site conditions that we told you last year. So we're just going to have a look at how that has turned out. So first of all, there is no place in the summary of site condition that's obvious, right? We don't have our own little headline saying what is your water use, so you have to be a little creative here. First of all, it's under your site conditions. Make sure that you provide us this site stratigraphy, right? What are your thickness of the different units? It will really help us to review what the water use is. And then just expand on your hydrogeology to explain why do you think that, for example, drinking water does not apply to this site. Okay, so you have to make sure that you provide sufficient information in your summary of site conditions for Amy and I to evaluate if drinking water does apply or not to this site. That means we do not look in your DSI, right? Everything has to be in the summary of site condition. And so I just provided here some statements or some data that we're looking for. First of all, you can't have current drinking water use. That's obvious. If you're exempting a site or a unit because it's not a viable aquifer, well, provide us with the hydraulic conductivity data, right? You use the maximum K value if it has less than 6 wells. If you have 6 wells or more, you can use the geometric mean. Added here that for bedrock, we are going to start requiring that you have yield test 2 done for that bedrock. It is actually in TD6 right now, and it's going to be clarified when P21 comes out. And it doesn't necessarily mean you do a full-blown pumping test, but you need to at least have pumped that bedrock well for 1.3 liters per minute to see if it's sustainable, as an extra test for your slug test. If you have a natural confining barrier, again, include your K values. Here, again, you use your maximum value if you have less than 6 wells, or you can use your 90th if you have more than 6 wells. Include the thickness, right? We need to see that you have 5 meters of this if you have a hydraulic conductivity that's less than 10 to the minus 7. And if you're in that 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 7 range, well, then you need to calculate your equivalent thickness and show that you have that thickness on your site. You have to show that it's contaminant-free, so we need some contamination data in that summary of site condition. And we need a statement to show that you actually evaluated that this unit is uniform and it's fracture-free. If you're exempting a shallow aquifer, well, first of all, you still cannot exempt a shallow aquifer that's hydraulically connected to a viable underlying aquifer. You either have to show that there's no aquifer underneath, or that you have a natural confining barrier protecting that aquifer from your shallow. And if that is the case, and you exempt it based on your saturated thickness is less than 2 meters, well, then write in your summary of site condition what your thickness is. If you have peat, you need to include your organic content. It has to be more than 30%, otherwise it's not peat. And if it's natural quality, well, you need to include that TDS value, and it has to be higher than 4,000. If you can't do this, right, maybe you're not exempt through TD6, and you have to go for a water use determination. So how does it look? What have Amy and I been doing the last year? We have more than 50 summary of site conditions come through where drinking water did not apply. We sort of divided them here in 4 different groups. The first one here, the information in the summary of site condition was sufficient for drinking water to not apply. And the next one, the information was insufficient for Amy and I to determine whether or not drinking water applied. But thank God the information was actually there. It was just hidden in the DSI, and it just had to be put forward in the summary of site condition. So sort of after going back and forth, sometimes once, sometimes multiple times, and iterating this summary of site condition, we could approve it and it could go on in the system. Then there are the sites where the drinking water exemption could not have gone through TD6. That site would have needed to go through us for a water use determination. And finally, there has been a couple of sites where actually drinking water would apply, and even with a director's determination, it would not have been approved. So after 50 summary site conditions, it is getting better. We have had 2 sites now where we're up in the green one, but the majority is still lying in this not so happy yellow one. And we have had a couple where, you needed a water use determination from us, and we have had a couple where drinking water would apply, and that really kind of sucks to find out this late in the process, right? So it would help everyone. It will help on our workload. It literally only takes 5 to 10 minutes for us to check whether or not drinking water applies to this site. So it's not something that delays the submission, but it does get delayed if the information is not there. So if you want to avoid that, well, get the information in there from the beginning, and your submission can be moved on.
Did you say only 2 were?
Yeah.
At the very beginning, when we got it.
After several iterations, most of them they end up in the green one, right? But it delays the submission. Extra work for us, extra work for you guys. So it would be good to just have it from the beginning. And Amy has some real life examples.
So rather than working through scenarios that may or may not exist, we thought we would just show what we've seen so far. So this is the one that got me really excited and happy. I received this one, I think, at the end of October, beginning of November, and I said to Dave, this is excellent. This is everything I want to see, because they've outlined all the information that we want to see. So if you noticed when Annette was showing that section 4.2, hydrogeology section has about 4 lines, and this person clearly used much more than 4 lines to explain why DW does not apply here. So there was the thickness K and yield measured in every unit. They had a saturated fill thickness that was less than 2 meters that they explained up there. They also measured the yield with an on-site pump test in the bedrock, so they could show it was less than 1.3 liters per minute, and they also calculated hydraulic conductivity as well. And on top of that, each overlying unit that existed, they had 3 units on top of the bedrock that they also evaluated, and were able to show that the K was less than 1 times 10 to the minus 6. And there were, essentially, they came up with the argument that there's no aquifers present. So that was, on the first go-around, DW does not apply, big happy face. That was very quick. I turned that around within the afternoon, and Dave just proceeded onwards. So I was hopeful it would continue that way.
What level of reliability was given with this data? Was it signed off by a hydrogeologist or someone?
It was signed off by an AP, so. So this is another example of the type of summary of site conditions that we've received. So in the stratigraphy, we have a bit of information on the fill. We know there's some till, but it's not more than 5 meters thick, and we know there's bedrock, and that the person's identified that there's an aquifer in bedrock. But there's not a whole lot of other information. We have no hydraulic data for the bedrock. We have no hydraulic data for the till. And we have no statement regarding the current use. So, there's nothing here that's apparent. And it doesn't mean that the work wasn't done, it just hasn't been brought forward in the summary of site conditions. So this one went back. And after a few iterations, it got a happy face as well, because the same bit for the stratigraphy, but at least now we know that there's a seasonal water table in the till that's less than 2 meters. that the K was measured in the bedrock, and as Annette mentioned, we will be looking for yield as well in the bedrock. And at this point, we're happy. So the work was done, and it was clear that DW does not apply, but we just needed that information to be brought forward in the summary of site conditions. So this is probably the most common example that we end up seeing where there's a natural confining barrier. And I think as science professionals, we get really excited by the science, and what makes us really interested and fired up is the hydraulic conductivity. We're doing our slug tests and our pump tests, and we're really keen on that, and we're giving that information. That's fantastic. But there's other things that are required for that confining barrier as well. So it's not just the K. We need to know that it's uniform, and we need to know that it's fracture-free. And we also need to know that there's no contamination in there. So the way that you present that information to us is that you need to structure your information that it's contaminant-free according to either Schedule 4 or 5 for the groundwater used for drinking water, or Schedule 10. And when you don't have a soil standard, then you also need to be comparing to Schedule 6. And you need to tell us at what depth, because sometimes you might have contamination into your confining barrier a meter or two. And if you only have a meter or two underneath that that's clean, that's not a sufficient barrier. So we need to know that there is at least 5 meters or an equivalent thickness below that. And so typically we're presented with the thickness information and the K information, but we're missing this little extra bit. So this one also went back out and then came back a few days later. So again, the information is somewhere in the report or the appendices, but we like to see it brought up into the summary of site conditions. So same information again, that the thickness is greater than 5 meters, and that the on-site hydraulic conductivity is less than 1 times 10 to the minus 7 meters per second. Great, it's protective of the underlying aquifer that you've pointed out, but now you've also told me where it's clean and what soil standards that you've met to make sure it's clean according to those schedules. And a small statement just to say that it's uniform and it's fracture-free, that you observed that while you were drilling and what wells you observed that in. Fantastic. We can move on. And then there are a couple where, you know, for example, we're just given information that the site's located in a peat bog, and that is missing lots of information for us. There's just no discussion of whether or not there's a current use, and then the whole future use evaluation as to whether or not there's any K measurements in the peat bog or in the deeper aquifers themselves. How have you excluded the deeper aquifer? Is it based on the natural water quality? Do you have TDS or an organic content? Do you have this in the shallow or the deep aquifers? Is there a confining unit? It doesn't appear that there is. And if you don't have a confining unit that's protecting that lower aquifer, you can't exempt that shallow aquifer. So DW ends up applying on this site. So I just wanted to give you a broad perspective of what we've seen in the past year. So, as you all know, we will be moving TG6 into Protocol 21. We'll also have a small technical bulletin that provides information on the assessment of hydraulic conductivity. So the document's been restructured and rewritten. Most of these changes that are going to be occurring in P21 are already in effect. So this exemption of the unconfined aquifer for a thickness that's less than 2 meters, that's been in effect for the past year. What the definition of a natural confining barrier is and how you can use an equivalent thickness, that's in effect. You can still present those arguments to us. The use of the statistics to calculate the hydraulic K for the aquifer versus the natural confining barrier itself, there's more language in P21 explaining this, which is fantastic, but we're accepting those arguments right now. And then again, there'll be more language in regards to bedrock evaluation, because this is what's proving to be very interesting with some of the examples that we're seeing coming through. So yield, we've mentioned that. What's going to be nice, I think, for the Falls Creek area in downtown Vancouver is that we will be accepting data that's within 500 meters of your site. So that will give a lot of relief so that you're not necessarily having to drill into your bedrock on your own site if you don't have contamination down to the bedrock. However, for mapped aquifers, those nice little red dots that Peter was showing in his presentation in Victoria, that might not be so helpful in Victoria. Those are mapped aquifers in the bedrock. So that will be a change that will be forthcoming with P21. So CSAP has completed their review, and there should be public comments this summer that we're expecting to receive. And as always, give us a ring or email us. We are seeing lots of interesting, wonderful things, and it keeps us on our toes because every site is different. It's hard to categorize, but we're here to help you, and so we're pleased to provide any assistance that you may need. And thanks.
I just had a question on the yield in bedrock. I know it's probably required as a hydrogeologist because it's hard to get a K value, but has that gone out to industry? Because Northeast BC in the oil and gas, that could just about every site would have to have some kind of yield, so that may be a pump test in the middle of nowhere. Has the industry commented on that? Knows about this?
Well, I mean, it's yields written in TG6 right now, so I suppose they would have.
It's ore though. New. It's K ore yield.
No. It says yield. TG6 yield in bedrock. It's clear. It's ore for evaluation of hydraulic conductivity for unconsolidated units.
Okay, so you're saying in bedrock right now in TG6 says yield is required.
Yeah.
Oh. So what's the change then?
That's the change. We're cracking down on it. We want to see it, so yeah.
Hi, Amy. Can we go back to the contamination in the confining unit?
Sure.
Is it based on, I thought actually the change was going to be based on soil only, and you indicated it's groundwater and soil?
Just where there is no soil standard, I'm thinking of benzoapyrene. There's a couple of them that just don't have a soil standard in Schedule 4, 5, or 10. Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on the amount of work required to complete some site condition. After a long time, I decided to do it myself because I had to get it out faster. And it took me a long time to complete that summary of site condition. We have a report where all these details are there. So now I'm just thinking, what is the objective summary of site condition? Why do we need so much detail in this one document? We can't charge a client. If I put my business development client management hat on, we can't charge a client $20,000 for a DSI and then also charge another $20,000 to complete this summary of site condition. Just something to think about.
Okay, sure.
I mean, the summary of site conditions is what the ministry use, right, when we check your submissions. So I think, first of all, it's fair that, it's as accurate and as precise as possible. That we would like to see the reason for the drinking water exemption was we were going to map them. And we had some examples of sites that have gone through that were not correct. So if we were going to use this for sort of a mapping exercise and potentially down the road maybe exempt areas where drinking water would not apply, we needed that to be correct. So,
I guess the level of detail, I guess, is what we need to look at.
Cut and paste out of your DSI.
Yeah, it is fairly simple. It is really just add your K values, add your thicknesses. For natural confining barrier, yes, there's a little bit more information you need to provide in there, but I think once you get used to it, it should really not be that much more work. And I find at least for Peter Reed's mapping project, at some point, maybe all you need to crack open now is the summary of site condition to see why did it not apply. You don't have to, get the whole DSI, figure out in which appendix the water use determination was made. So, I mean, if you get the summary of site conditions in there along with your COC, then you have all the information you need. So it would be helpful down the road too. Anything else? No? Good.